Happy New Year, airplane collectors. Welcome to the channel's first video of 2023. It's your host, Ray. I hope you all are doing okay this year, and I hope you're off to a great start. In today's video, I'll be reviewing the Inflight 200 American Airlines Boeing 757-200 in the old livery with winglets. As far as I'm aware, this model was released in late 2022. I'm not really certain about that, though. All I know is that this model started arriving to retailers in the first days of 2023. In this video, I'll talk about the box, then the model itself, and at the end of the video, I'll give my personal opinion about what I think of the model and whether or not I recommend it to other collectors. Starting off with the box in terms of box art is the standard Inflight 200 box, nothing really special about it. It's 23 centimeters lengthwise and height-wise, and it's about 9 centimeters wide. So I'm not sure if that's consistent with other Inflight 200 757 boxes. So it's reasonably sized. That's all I really have to say about it. Show you on the box for now. Side. And here's the back side. Something that I'd like to point out very quickly on the box art here is you can see on the aircraft, on the top of the fuselage, there appears to be some sort of like white Wi-Fi dome or sat dome or something right behind the winglet. That's actually not on the aircraft. And I did a bit of research, and by research I mean like a 30-second Google search, and the aircraft with this registration, I don't think it ever had a sat dome there. So yeah, that's kind of something that I noticed that was inconsistent with the box art in the model. Once you open up the box, you get the model fully assembled, painted, and ready to go in most cases. Sometimes the model has arrived broken to some collectors. You also get a display stand and two options for landing gear configurations, one of which is in the extended position, which I have the aircraft in right now, and the other is the retracted position, which you see in front of the display stand. I will demonstrate what both look like later in the video. The display stand is made out of solid metal and it fits the model quite nicely. There's even a little foam cushion that separates the fuselage of the model from the display stand, ensuring that your model will not be damaged when you put the model on the display stand. Fit is very secure and your model will not fall, and I have no complaints about the display stand. Before I begin the review, I'm going to give you guys a quick 360 of the model so you can get a good look around it. The fuselage length for this model is 24 centimeters, the wingspan is 19 centimeters, and it's about 7 centimeters tall, accurate to 1:200 scale, and it's fairly large. It's also pretty heavy because this model is made primarily out of die-cast metal. I'll start up the review up at the front of the aircraft. Here we can see the nose section of the airplane. I'd like to talk a lot about the nose section, and I'll start off by saying the nose shape on this aircraft is absolutely atrocious. It's hard to see the definition of the nose shape with the gray desk that I film these videos on, but I'll try and describe it the best I can. The nose appears to be way too pointy at the nose cone section here, and as it goes up to the fuselage, hits the cockpit windows, and then moves upward, there is not a very noticeable curve or difference in curvature here, which on the real 757 is a bit more noticeable than this, and by a bit I mean a lot, significantly more noticeable. So the nose shape on this particular example is pretty scary. I'll just say that. It's very unexpected for a 1:200 scale model. A 1:400 scale model would be a bit more expected, but I mean, this was a pretty nasty surprise. Another thing I'd like to point out is something that I've seen across many examples, is the coloring of the lines and just the painting on the nose. The painting on the nose it just looks pretty unprofessional. Here you can see on the white line there is a section which is brighter than the rest of the line, which indicates a part of the white line paint or printing or whatever this is, where it intersected. And you shouldn't be able to see that generally on a model. I mean, it shouldn't be that well defined. And that kind of shows that the whole coloring thing didn't really go that well. And it's also indicative here on the red sheet line right under the white line. Here on the gray nose cone here, or nose cap if you will, you can see where it continues up the nose with this little difference in color between the red colors. This section of red is darker than this section of red that's over the nose cone. So yeah, the coloring on the nose really didn't go that well. I've also seen on a few examples where there are paint chips and marks on the cockpit windows, particularly on the right side. I think I do have one on mine, so I'll show that when I go to the right side of the aircraft. With that out of the way, I'd like to proceed down the fuselage. The rest of the fuselage is actually pretty decent. Color looks pretty nice. The polish looks really good. There are a few things here and there that are rather imperfections that I noticed. Oh, don't focus on the winglet, please. Okay, there we go. Yeah, my camera sometimes has issues focusing. Yeah, coloring is good. Lots of printed detail to go around, so I won't complain too much about the rest of the fuselage. Here's a quick look at the vertical stabilizer. No complaints up here. It looks pretty solid. Printing looks good. Details look good. Yeah, let's keep moving. Moving down the right side of the fuselage. Overall, the same thing in general applies here. It's the same story as the left side. Printing looks pretty good overall. Details look good. No complaints for the main part of the fuselage except for the issues with the nose. Here's the right side of the nose that I was going to try and show you, that little mark on the cockpit window. There's a very small white stain there, and that's honestly something pretty tiny, but there were other examples where I saw more white stains across the cockpit windows, and you can also see a little bit of a red stain right here on the white nose cone, so that's a little bit of a... that's something I just noticed. So yeah, overall, painting and printing on the nose was not very good. Moving on to the wings, here's what the top of the wing looks like. The wings, unlike most of the fuselage at least, these are actually half decent in terms of their overall shape. I'll show you guys what the problem with the wings is later. But yeah, overall, decent amount of printed detail here. Coloring looks good. No complaints, really. Bottom of the wings, they also have a bit of color detail. No printed detail down here, but there's not really that much to cover, so that's not really a complaint. Plenty of molded detail down here as well. Overall, looks pretty solid on the wings. Now for the winglets on the model, the winglets look pretty solid. The logos and the details are printed very nicely on the outside here. Looks pretty solid, no complaints. And here's what the inside of the right winglet looks like. The winglets are pretty solid on this model. I have no complaints about them. Moving to the rear section of the aircraft, here we can see the horizontal stabilizers, the APU, and a few antennas that made their way back here. The antenna back here, it looks okay, however, it is kind of angled downwards. I'm not 100% sure if that's supposed to be that way, but it looks attached nicely. It looks shaped like it's shaped nicely, so I really won't complain about it. APU looks pretty detailed. There's actually a little hole for the APU exhaust, and there's a little bit of difference in the gray between the fuselage and the APU exhaust where that starts, so very nicely detailed. There's also this antenna back here. Not really sure what to think of it, but it's there. No complaints on that. And down here you can see some APU access doors as well. Those look pretty solid. The engines on this model are also pretty solid. The pylons look like they're shaped nicely. There's a bit of detail in the pylons as well. Printed detail on the engines looks pretty good, and the exhaust section actually looks pretty nice. So you can see the inside of the exhaust nozzle. I'm gonna do my best to show that. Unfortunately, it looks like the inside of the exhaust nozzles aren't painted on this model, so that's a little bit of a bummer right there. They're painted white instead of like a metallic gray like the rest of the exhaust. And the fan blades on this model actually look pretty good. I'm not sure what that... there's like two rings there behind the fan blades themselves. I'm not sure why those are there, but I'm going to assume that's accurate to the 757. I'm not 100% sure. The fan blades do spin very smoothly. There's no fan blade detail, which was rather unexpected since Inflight usually does that kind of stuff with other models, but I guess they didn't want to on this one. Nonetheless, the fan blades look pretty good, and the engines are pretty solid. This model has a variety of aerial features such as 3D lights, antennas, and whatever these two little black things are. I'm not really sure what those are called. They're all three-dimensional. This light right here is in fact 3D, which is pretty cool. This antenna up here looks pretty solid. It's the only antenna on the top of the aircraft. And then there's these two little structures here, which I'm not sure what they're called, but they look good. However, I did notice that one of them was not attached correctly. It looks as though part of it dried, separated from the aircraft, and this would be an easy fix, but it's just something that I noticed. So quality control on that part of the aircraft wasn't really that hot. Ironically, on the bottom of the aircraft, there's a few more antennas. There's no other 3D structures other than antennas and the lights. There's two large antennas, one in the rear section of the aircraft, one here towards the front and middle section of the aircraft. There's also a red light, just like the one on the top of the fuselage, right here, right next to the landing gear doors. That looks pretty good. And of course, there's the two antennas that I mentioned earlier, one here at the rear section of the aircraft and one right next to the APU. All of them look pretty good in terms of alignment. They were attached very nicely to the model. I have seen a few examples with broken antennas, so that may be an issue with this release. The landing gear on this model look pretty solid. They're very nicely detailed, and as I said earlier, they do offer two configurations, such as the extended position and the retracted position, and these landing gear are attached to the model through a system of magnets. These magnets hold the gear pretty securely. Rolling the model around is not really a good idea since it may cause the gear to separate, but the gears will not fall out if you have the gear extended on the display stand, so they hold pretty solid. All of the wheels do roll. Some of them are a little bit harder to roll than others, but they are still pretty consistent. You can see kind of how the landing gear moves a little bit if you apply a little bit of forward pressure on it. Nose gear looks pretty solid as well. I think it's supposed to rotate, however, mine is pretty stiff, and you can kind of see a little bit of a stain on the wheel there. Mine is pretty stiff. It doesn't spin very much, so if you're picky about that, take that into account. But there are 3D lights on the landing gear, on the nose gear as well, and it also attaches to the aircraft through a system of magnets like the main gear, and I really don't have any complaints. The landing gear does lean backwards a little bit like on the real 757, so it is an accurate replication of the landing gear. Here I've attached the landing gear covers for the retracted landing gear position, and overall these fit very nicely, which is something I'm not used to on 1:200 scale models, so I definitely appreciate that. Here on the main landing gear, you can see the covers fit very snugly with the wings, and you can see the little holes that are included to make removing the covers easier. With this model, you receive two particularly long and sharp removal tools, which you just have to stick into here, and well, yeah, you just put a bit of pressure and they fall right out, so that's very convenient. As for the one on the nose, this one fits pretty well. It does kind of protrude a little bit from the fuselage, but there's nothing that a little bit of modification can't save. Oh boy. Yeah, you can see it looks pretty good, and it also has a little hole, so you can use the removal tools to remove it. This one's a little bit easier actually, just pop it out like that. The last segment of the review is a view at the front of the aircraft, and here I'd like to point out the wing issue that I mentioned earlier. You can see that the wings are bent up a substantial amount. The wing flex on this model is just too high. I'm pretty forgiving in terms of the margins for wing flex, but this is just, it's not accurate. It doesn't look right. In terms of gear balance, though, the model appears to be balanced near perfectly. So the landing gear overall is done very nicely, and it's pretty impressive considering that they're attached through magnets, which isn't usually the strongest support system, so that's very nice. Cockpit window printing looks ironically symmetrical, despite how bad the rest of it, the nose section was. It is quite symmetrical, so that's very nice. Vertical stabilizer looks like it's not tilted or anything like that, so yeah, quite a few mixed feelings from this view of the aircraft. And that concludes my review of this model. Now time for my personal opinion and recommendation. Overall, I was pretty surprised at the quality control of this model. It was definitely less than what I expected, and I think my feelings can be shared with other collectors who have received this model. So quality control was spotty. The nose shape really let me down for sure. That definitely did a blow to this model. And honestly, I'm not sure I'd recommend this model to other collectors due to the faulty quality control. I've seen other collectors with models, like I said earlier, with scratches, with broken antennas, which those are easy to fix, but yeah, that kind of stuff shouldn't be happening on a model like this. And I mean, I don't really recommend it because of the quality control, but I would recommend it because this is a highly sought after model. It's extremely hard to find, and it usually sells pretty fast. And so you really don't have any other option at this time to get a 1:200 scale American Airlines Boeing 757. So there you have it. That's the review. Apologies, I went way over the usual time that I'm due to make these reviews, but I had to cover everything. Thank you so much for watching. Unfortunately, we did start 2023 off to a rather rough start in terms of modeling, but can't win every battle, so the next one should be a little bit better. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for more model, airplane, and siren content. Yes, I promise there will be siren content, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Take care of yourselves. See you later.